Church of the Larger Fellowship Unitarian Universalist weekly pod show, online video show. So we're excited to welcome our guests this week. Lisa Garcia Sampson is here and Janine Gelsinger is here, and we're going to have them introduce themselves in just a little while. But first, your hosts of The View usually just take a minute to tell you how we are and where we are. So I'm Christina Rivera. I'm coming to you from Augusta County, Virginia, where it is overcast and cool finally, cool without being humid. Finally, we had the cool, but the humid, which isn't really cool, last week. Not cool with my hair at all. Um, and so I'm excited to be with you all. Aisha, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser and I'm in Seattle, Washington. Love your haircut, Chris. Beautiful. I want to give a shout out to your beautiful do. It's overcast. It usually is here. It's supposed to be a windstorm tomorrow. Yeah, the weather here is pretty moderate no matter what happens. And snow, they're so cute when it snows here. They panic and I'm like, oh, it's like maybe half an inch. No, I mean, it got to 4 once, but by the afternoon, it's literally gone. So anyway, that's how it is here. And Quiana, how are you? What's happening in Michigan?
Yay! So my name's Quiana. My pronouns are she and her. I am currently in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the weather here has been like stunning. Like the sun has been out. The other day it was 70. I did my walk with like a jacket on and was hot. And then yesterday it cooled off and I wasn't ready. So we're 40 with like dazzling sun. Like you need sunglasses, but you need all your clothes. You know what I mean? Like that beautiful vortex. And we're doing pretty good. I think that winter's going to sneak up on us. It's the 12th and there's not a snowflake in the sky. And for the Midwest, that is an absolute blessing. And it's also a little nerve wracking because it's coming. It's coming. There's no way around winter in the Midwest. So I'm leaning into that. I am excited actually to introduce our guest if that's what's next. Oh, Don is here. I'll let Don introduce themselves and then our guest. Sorry, I was small screen, big screen.
That's okay. Thank you. I skated in at the last minute. I was sat down early and then looked up and it was 12 o'clock. So that happens in my world, it seems. So I'm Dawn Fortune. I am here in South Jersey. I'm in this little town called Egg Harbor City, where apparently we're going to be building an ark soon. It's just been pouring down buckets, and I'll be glad when it's done. But we still got the muggy thing going on, Chris. I don't like, it's still humid here and it's just bleh. I am a lover of summer, but boy, oh boy, will I be glad to feel that dry, crisp fall air when it happens. So I'm glad to be here and I'm excited to be talking to our awesome guests. I'm going to hand it off to Tanner because Tanner always gets sort of lost in the shuffle. Tanner, go ahead.
Thanks, Dawn. I'm Tanner Linden. I'm the tech person for the VUU and the outreach manager for the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I will be copying and pasting your comments from YouTube so our hosts can see them. So please comment and I will make sure the hosts see them. And if you have any other tech related questions, just comment on our YouTube chat and I will be over there to help you. And I'll pass it back to Chris.
Thanks so much, Tanner. Tanner, did you say did you give the hashtag? You did, didn't you? Yes. Excellent. I just want to make sure that folks knew how to add us if they need to. Last night,
I don't think I did, but I'll put it in the YouTube chat. But hashtag the view with VUU is the way to get to us.
That's the way to find us. I was talking with my twin boys last night, and one of them was saying something for the other one, and I responded, and he was like, "Don't at me, at my brother." I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, now I know how it's going." So we usually have a few minutes for the UU Roundup, and usually we talk about the UU Roundup a couple minutes before we come on air with you all, but today we didn't have a chance. So we're going to do the UU Roundup just as the Spirit moves us. So if anybody on our co-hosts or our guests have any kind of UU news that has come out in the past week that you think needs a shout out or a highlight, do so. Quiana, you look like you have something to say.
I am plotting a thought right now, but I'm looking it up as well because sometimes you got to be multi-talented in how you roll.
Well, we can rant for a little while you get that. That's
no,
good.
I did it already. That's how good I am. I wanted to acknowledge that there is about 7 communities who have become Blue Black Lives Unitarian Universalism havens. There will be one in Akron, Ohio, Asheville, Chicago, Dayton, Philadelphia, Richmond, Rockville, and Topeka, Kansas. So if you are a Black person listening, you identify as Black and you want to find some additional community, those havens are forming. You can find it on the closed Facebook page. If you are a Black person listening and you're not a UU, we still welcome you because it's more about living into the principles than it is about taking on an identity that doesn't feel affirming for you. So we look forward to seeing you in those communities. We look forward to adding more havens in the coming months. And that's my congratulations to those folks who went through the process and became havens in this last quarter.
Do you know how people can join, Quiana? Do they go to the Blue website? How can they join a haven if they live near one?
Yes, go to the website. I'm going to just honestly say I don't have an answer, but I do have the website and Google. So that's what I would dig into to find out more.
Anything else for our UU roundups? Something.
I can jump in quick. So I'm Lisa, and I serve as the UU Justice Ministry lead for North Carolina. And we actually have tons of, I know we'll be talking about post-election work right now. And one thing that's on a lot of people's mind is Georgia and how we can continue our beautiful work and showing up for the Georgia runoff. So one thing that is just announced this week, and you can go on to, I think this week, like 5 minutes ago, uuthevote.org, you can check it out. We're gonna have our phone bank launch in partnership with Reclaim Our Vote. Our Georgia phone bank is going to kick off on this Sunday at 3:00 Eastern. And so it's going to be the Georgia phone bank launch. So I'll be there with Kathy Ryan Starr and Kelsey Cowger, some of our UU the Vote folks, and then our really amazing team of our volunteer squad. And we're going to hook everybody up with how to sort of know how to use the dialer and how to get going. And then we'll do a first round of phone banking, and then those dialers will be open for folks to just jump in and be making those calls throughout this next stretch before the runoff. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And folks who listened to the podcast last week know that we had UU the Vote national organizer Nicole Presley on. And shortly after she was on here, she and Susan Frederick Gray did a great kind of conversation about the UU the Vote. So we put the link in the comment section so you all can check that out. It's really great to see how we can be a faith-grounded, movement-connected organization for change. And so really excited to be able to direct folks to that. So thanks y'all for the UU the Roundup vote. Lisa, I was going to lead off with your introduction, but that's okay because you just introduced yourself and we're so excited that you're here. And Janine, do you want to give your introduction?
Sure. I'm so happy to be back on The View with my buddies. Thanks for having me. I'm Janine Gelsinger. I'm the Executive Director of UU Jazz, which is the state action network here in Phoenix, Arizona, where it is only 53, I think, and they're like clouds. I think this is the only time I've come to you from Phoenix and said it was not hot and sunny. So I guess we're just gonna have to like accept the fact that it's only gonna get up to the low 70s today. And then besides being a part of UU Jazz in Arizona, I have a new role. I've recently joined the curriculum development team at Meadville Lombard Theological School for Beloved Conversations. So currently we are leading 1,000 white folks through anti-racism curriculum in our new Beloved Conversations virtual version in this fall. So that's been pretty exciting as
I have to give a shout out to you, Janine, because you're in Arizona. And I think after everything's been decided, it's going to feel like the day after your wedding, because Arizona's been getting so much attention in Pennsylvania. And then it's going to be over finally, eventually, hopefully with no coup. And it's going to be like the day after the wedding. It's like, there's no more
Everyone
attention.
forgot about us.
Everyone.
Yeah. No, I've been enjoying the national attention, and I will certainly miss it when it's over, for sure.
I wanted to do just acknowledge something really fast before we move forward. I want to acknowledge Lori's birthday, and I assume they're watching because they're a super fan. But their birthday was in the last few days, and I just this is the space I got to know them, and I just want to kind of honor their traveling around the sun one more good time. And hopefully when COVID lifts, we'll be in spaces together where we can hug on each other and just be, share all of our goodness with each other. So Lori, I think you be the tech person for the show. So
Lori Stone? Yeah, Lori Stone's birthday was it yesterday? Or 2 days ago?
Maybe. Both of those are options. I'm saying I know that energy is here and I want to just acknowledge it. How about that? Whenever your trip around the sun started, we were excited and celebrating, and we continue.
Amen. Let me get some of this in there for Lori if you're watching.
Yay!
Lori, because ever since we started the confetti game, I have it on my desk. Oh my God, you have it too. Okay, great. Joy is an act of resistance. Keep that confetti flowing.
Exactly. So this is love as faith in action, right? So that's what we're going to lean in and talk about, y'all, is how do we make this faith that we know is real for us live and tangible and yummy? So I'm excited about this topic. I love faith in action. I had my aunt who named me, who passed away a few years ago now, from lupus. She would say, she would say love in action, LIA. So that was her thing. So she would like roll up on you. Like she'd be like, where are you? You'd be like, oh, I'm at the store. She'd be like, okay. And you'd look up and she'd be outside the store to give you a ride home. Or she'd call you and say, what's your favorite candy bar? And then all of a sudden you'd get a package with your favorite candy bars. Or she'd be like, we going out Saturday, and you'd put on your outfit and get on the stairs, and she'd just take you on her errands with her, because she really believed that if I loved you, I'm going to spend time with you. I'm going to build a relationship with you. I'm going to actively engage in the things that make you feel good and affirmed. And so for me and my family, some of the code words that we have is like, if we say love for life, that's what my sister would always say to us. My sister Dorian would say, and then we always usually followed up with love in action, like LIA, like don't tell me you love me, show me you love me. And that might mean just picking up the phone and texting, I love you. So I'm excited about this. How do we manifest what we know to be inside, outside? So I'll just leave that out there.
Quiana, last time I was here, we were going to talk about taco ministry, and then we talked about something else. But like when you're talking about your aunt and bringing food, at UU Jazz in Arizona, we have something that we've kind of nicknamed taco ministry. And it basically means when there's any action going down in Phoenix, UUs are going to show up with food. And so taco ministry kind of transformed into Pizza the Polls on election day. And we had UUs across the city just on hold, ready to order pizza for whatever polling location. So I was part of the Election Defenders, which is led by the Frontline, which is Movement for Black Lives and Working Families Party. And on the Election Defenders Slack, people were letting us know when their polls, the line got a little long and they needed some pizza to keep people in line. And UUs were just ordering pizza across the city and sending it to the polls. So when I think of faith in action and how to bring joy, I mean, it's food sometimes can't be beat as a way to just concretely do a thing, show your love, feed people.
Y'all crushed it, Janine, in Arizona. The pictures are so beautiful. I think we tried to do that in North Carolina during early voting and on election day. And one other piece I think love in action is just like we keep us safe. And in the moments where we need to be really nimble and ready to be where we need to be, and when safety is a concern, that was a really proud moment to see so many UUs. I'm thinking of like Heather Vickery. She was on a national like listserv, like where do you need people like in the country? And she drove to North Carolina from Boston, like in a day, because they're like, we actually need people in this place. And so I think, yeah, just showing up. And right now, like UU the Vote has always been about our relationships. It's always been about relationships. And so in this last stretch, and even as we move away from the election, I think just making sure that we're showing up and recognizing, especially those of us that are privileged enough to not really understand sometimes firsthand the level of the safety concerns of this moment, even after the election, especially after this election, the safety concerns of this moment, to be nimble and just be listening for how can we show up. And we did that in Graham, North Carolina on election day. There was 2 days before, there was a big police altercation, and then there was a march that day to the election polls, to the polls. And so there was just an all call for clergy, and our UU clergy showed up. And so I think those are the moments that we can be proud of. It's not always, tacos are also, we got to really get our food game going, Janine. But I think that's a real call right now, is to think about how we can experience, how we can act in terms of keeping people safe, keeping us safe in this post-election moment.
And I think one thing I appreciate about the state action networks and North Carolina in particular, and the way people are showing up in Arizona, is it's really important to show up as followers and to really flank our partners who are leading, people of color. When Lisa was talking about Georgia and how to act in Georgia, I was really thinking, like, I love that we're phone banking in instead of everyone just deciding they're going to like move to Georgia and save the Senate. I really appreciate UUs who have been able to receive the message when they ask us, what can we do for Georgia? And they want to go. And, I've been recommending to folks, like, I want you to think about how much money you would spend on your plane ticket, your Airbnb or your hotel. And what if you just gave that money to New Georgia Project? Because Black women have got Georgia. And so maybe just get them paid. Because they don't necessarily need you there, but what can you do to support that movement? We had a conversation the other day in the Beloved Conversations team, and one of our lessons, so we've been using Tema Oken and Kenneth Jones's white supremacy, the symptoms
Culture.
of white supremacy. Right. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know what's happening with the brain.
It's characteristics of white supremacy culture.
Thank you. Characteristics of white supremacy culture. And we've been talking a lot about the antidotes. And so when we think about power hoarding and the way dominant culture tells us to hang on to power and not share it, an antidote to that was recommended as servant leadership. And we were talking on the curriculum design team, and we're like, you know what? I don't even think we want to say servant leadership. I think we're actually just talking about followership. Like, maybe you can just follow. You don't need to be, servant leadership is like, I'm leading you, but I'm like doing it in a way that supports you. And we decided we're gonna instead talk about what followership looks like. And maybe you don't have to be in the lead at all. And I think that's something that UU the Vote really promoted all throughout, is learning, like, how do we be accountable partners, and how do we just show up to bring the food or do the phone banking or send the money. In Arizona, it was definitely as a lot of you saw nationally, folks who live in the Navajo Nation really show up to vote. It was like a 98% turnout there, right?
Can we just stop? Can we hold that for a second?
Sure.
For a group of folks who are seriously disenfranchised, whether it be land or water or access to resources or acknowledgement of their full humanity, to step up and show up when they didn't have to, but because they understand the connected reality of our collective liberation. Even though most folks don't see their collective liberation in the Navajo Nation is still beautiful and amazing, and recognized our shared humanity, regardless of, frankly, white people behavior. I just want to say out loud, I acknowledge and I am humble that that connection to humanity exists, and that they were able to step up into what was being asked of them so fully without argument or hesitation. And I just want to acknowledge that in its fullness.
Yeah.
And I want.
Oh, go ahead, Don.
Well, I was just saying that yesterday was Veterans Day, and there is no single demographic in the United States with the per capita volunteer record of Native peoples when it comes to voluntary military service. It just boggles my mind, the culture of giving, the culture of being so much better than the rest of us sometimes. Volunteering to serve in a military that represents a nation that treats them horribly, but volunteering because of the interconnectedness. That's just, it's just part and parcel of the whole thing. But on Veterans Day, I thought I'd mention it.
And the converse of that also is the fact that military service is sometimes the only way that marginalized communities, can and that's taken advantage of, and that's preyed upon by our military industrial complex. And so we saw so many folks in the immigrant community, that was one of the only paths to citizenship. So you had to literally risk your life and change your psyche, to be okay with killing people in order to become a citizen. And I absolutely agree with you, Don, that I so appreciate the interconnected part of the volunteerism of military service, and also acknowledge that sometimes it isn't like the leverage to get people to quote unquote volunteer is
it's coercion. It's coercion. I get that.
Yeah.
It's economic coercion. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get it. It's complex. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely complex. I'm a person that, is highly against the military industrial complex, and have tons and tons of family who have served, including my father, including I had, POWs, MIA, like the whole gamut. And it is so complex to be proud of something that is actively harming you.
One of the saddest hashtags I saw recently, and I apologies for not knowing exactly what the hashtag was, but it was basically, what would you say to your recruiter? And it was folks currently in the military, just like, I would tell him to go F himself, or I would, like, clearly it was, they were sold a bill of goods. And so it was just, it like, some of it was angry, but a lot of it was just sad. Like, your heart breaks for kind of wide-eyed teenagers, really, that don't have many options, as you were speaking to what you said, Chris, and then join the military. So, it's part of violent extractive capitalism, right? So it's part of the whole thing. I have a question to move away from this a little bit, but to go back to the point about, two things. One is, Black and brown folks are clear about what needs to be done to take care of community. There is no divide, for the most part, among Black and brown people. Over 75% are clear that we need to care for each other. Didn't vote for this current garbage death government that has 70 days left. The divide is among white people. That's the divide. That's the 55, 60, 70% who voted to continue this, to subjugate Black and brown people, to kill them. So I'm kind of still bad. I've been to many meetings this week, and how many white people, I can't believe 70 million voted for him. And I'm like, but why? I didn't even think he was going to lose. Like, I was hoping he would lose, but I did not go into this election with any delusion that somehow there was going to be some flipping wave to take him out. So how is it not a surprise? So my question to Janine and Lori is, what do you see being put in place? Because as we mentioned with Nicole last week, and even the week before that, we talked about an election season. However, people get really excited, really motivated, and then they're done, especially white people, because this doesn't impact them anymore, they don't think. So what are some, is there infrastructure being put in place? Because the vote came after the 2016 election, right? So what is being put in place to continue the faith in action, the enthusiasm, the mandate, the charge, the commitment to who we are as Unitarian Universalists to keep this going? Because Biden and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are conservative, really. I mean, they're liberal compared to a garbage death government, but they're not liberal. I mean, let's be clear. My Canadian friends are like, they're not right. They're not left, right? I'm like, yeah, we're clear. And they're not garbage death people. So yay. So anyway, that's my question.
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a really important question. I saw on social media yesterday, someone was posting their text messages. They were a wait staff person, and they were posting their texts on Sunday from their boss saying, can you come in early for your shift? Because we've never had this many brunch reservations. And everyone just went, no. Like on Sunday, everyone's just going back to brunch instead of understanding that this is long haul movement work. And so, I mean, I think the importance of the conversation is, how do you participate all the time, not just when there's an election? And how do you understand that no matter who is in office, you need to show up and hold them accountable, that your participation is important? And I think especially with white folks, there's a paradox. I was talking to Nicole Presley, our UU Vote organizer, about this, and there's a paradox in white folks hold so much power and they're so afraid to use it when it comes to lobbying and advocating with their elected officials. There's this weird, it's dominant culture, right? It's white supremacy culture, where you think that you can't speak to someone because they're a senator, and that hierarchical behavior where they don't understand their own power, and yet they hold so much of it. Because
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I'm going to disagree with you, not disagree. Okay. I'm going to push back a little bit. That's only true when asking to advocate for Black and brown people. That is not true when it's about guns, when it's about what they think is pro-life and abortion. Like I don't think that's a universal truth. I think my experience has been, there's been reluctance and reticence to go all the way with rights for immigrants, for the Native community, for Black people, to reform the carceral state, the prison industrial complex. So I think that your statement is true with an asterisk. I don't think it's blanket true, because white people and their guns, I have not seen any reluctance to threaten senators with death if you don't, if you're going to take my gun away, or our abortion doctors have been murdered. So I don't think that's a universal truth. I think it's when it comes to advocating for Black and brown people, I think that's true. Then it's like suddenly there's a shine. The Democratic Party does it too. They suddenly come to a certain point and they're like, well, we can't go all the way, because then we'd be giving, human rights to everyone. And do we really want that?
Yeah, I hear you. You're right.
I would say that it seems like white people allow ourselves to be selfish but not generous. We're willing to cause discomfort if it is for our own benefit. We're willing to cause people discomfort if it's to get the discount on the price I want to see the manager, or I want to get my gun, or whatever. But to be generous of spirit and work for somebody else's benefit, then suddenly we're worried that somebody might not like us when we do that. We're fragile, fragile creatures.
I think it takes me back, though, Don, to some conversation that you and I were. Can we do that screen thing where we're both on at the same time? Because I like when we share the spotlight, because we're going to have a dialogue. Remember last week we were talking about liberal white people? And
I did again, didn't I?
No, you didn't. But I think it's part of that same conversation.
Okay.
So think about what you're saying and flip it into that model. Like, what is the code word white people use to have those behaviors and do those sort of things? I'm a liberal white person, so I am justified in asking for the manager and disrespecting someone. I'm a liberal white person, so I have space to do thing A and justify it. It's a part of that power and privilege kind of dialogue we were having. Can you see that parallel, or you made a face, so I'm trying to figure out.
I'm trying to follow, but I'm a little stuck.
Can anybody else want to tap in, as my friend Sweetie would say? We got to stop listening to trap music before this show.
I think as white folks, we haven't all had a lot of experiences of being held accountable to show up for our communities. And so we have a world we exist in where everything is a choice and we can do it or not, and not really suffer a lot of consequences or accountability. And so labeling ourselves as like a good liberal white person allows us to excuse ourselves from the fight because we're one of the good ones. So it's okay for me to replicate some of these behaviors instead of actually being held accountable to how our choices are affecting our community, because we've been raised with that narrative of individualism, right? And of, I was told when I was a kid, I could do anything. I could be anyone, right? I really had that narrative of you can do anything, and not like you have to make choices on how it affects your community. And so, going back to Quiana's example of the manager and like you can excuse your own behavior because you're one of the good ones, I think that we haven't all been held to account and forced to examine what is our participation in what affects our community and what affects the greater good, based on the choices that we make.
And where the perception of power is. So the choice is not only we're not going to care for, is that Black and brown communities right now don't have the seat of power and are still working tirelessly to care for communities. What we're talking, I think one of the things we're naming here is what you just said about individualism. And I think I'll go further and say it's individualism. And then when the rubber hits the road, it's where is the power? Right. So it's I'm going to go this far with helping Black and brown communities until it becomes too far, because then the power structure is going to punish me if I'm a white person. Right. So I think it's that's the part of the Democratic National Party Committee, especially, that's complicit with what's going on, because this nonsense of indulging can I just digress for a second? Because this has been gnawing at me. What other demographic, Black, gay, woman, any other demographic that would behave this way, and I mean by this way, denying the results of an election, refusing to concede, having an entire system say, why don't we let him what's the word? Somebody said, like, indulge him for a few days. What other demographic? Just name one other demographic that this would be allowed and this would be okay. An entire fucking government would just indulge a man-child with no clothes. Let's just ask ourselves that. What? Okay, that was my rant for the morning.
Well, and I think it gets to the question of what is community, right? Because as Janine's talking about, people, and when we talk about people, are we talking about white people, or are we talking about everyone when we say people? Being held accountable for decisions that affect their community. Well, who is in that community, right? Who is the we that we are talking about? Because if your idea of community is, in our universalist sense, everyone is saved, everyone, is already, worthy of God's love, then our sense of community has to be larger than a demographic that we identify with that gives us power, right? Because that's what our communities right now are are centered on is, what kind of community can give me the power that I need to survive and then thrive. And so if we look at it from a sense of our faith, and I love, just a shout out for Tanner Linden, who did CLF's newsletter. We have an article that comes out every Thursday. Tanner wrote ours today, and he talks about being loving loudly as Unitarian Universalists, and that part of our call is to love each other loudly, so that we love each other so loudly, and these are Tanner's words, we love each other so loudly that the other hate sounds become white noise, that you can't hear it because we are loving each other so loudly. And I promise I'm going to use that with credit to Tanner in many more times to come, and we all should too, because the idea that we're holding each other accountable. Yes, Janine, we absolutely have to hold each other accountable. But within community, who is in that community? Because if that community doesn't include me, that community doesn't include Quiana, if that community doesn't include Dawn, if it doesn't include people, then does it even matter that you're being held accountable?
And to piggyback on what Chris is saying in terms of accountability, one of the things that we do in the brick and mortar UUAA is that we're really cognizant of pastoral care and caring for each other, and what we call congregant to congregant care. The minister can't do everything. That's just not an option. But I can send you a card. I can bring you a meal. I can engage you in ways that don't require that I put my own health at risk. And so I think we think sometimes the actions we have to take are humongous. I have to give the plane ride amount that I would have spent to go to Atlanta to this Black group of women. And really 32 cents on a card that says thank you to somebody can be a shifting thing. My kids get thank you cards from church, and at this age, they're like, I'm going to put those all in a stack, and they're going to open those in 20 years and be like, whoa, somebody really appreciated my time and my effort. Every card I get, I save because I know it meant somebody took the time. So I think I'm trying to lean into a conversation that says, how do you find your lane? How do you find how to take your faith internal and make it outward action? And I think it can look like a lot of things, you all. I think I would love to hear some ways, big or small, that you've either been able to lean in locally or cultivate community. How are we cultivating and being in community so that it changes our relationships? It changes our relationship to power. It changes our relationship to resources. Because for all of our talk, which I'm not saying in a pejorative, we still got to hit rubber to road, right? Like when this show is off, the 7 of us still have to go manage our communities, pay our bills, and be in real time. So how do we translate what we know to be true up here into here?
Yeah, I mean, I think when, Christina, when you were talking about community, if you are a white, retired, not struggling financially, UU, and your only view of your community is other people just like you, then maybe you're fine. Maybe, COVID just meant you missed brunch. Like maybe this administration didn't personally hurt your family. Maybe actually you got a bigger tax break. And so how do we make sure that we understand that our community is what our universalist roots are calling us to, right? Which is everyone, or the vision of the beloved community. And so to answer Quiana's question, to go back to our conversation about the Navajo Nation, at the beginning of COVID, we certainly understood in Arizona that, the Navajo Nation for a while had the highest COVID rates in the country. And so what do we do then? How do we show up? How do we put our faith in action? And one thing I feel really proud of is that one of our churches here in Arizona, they actually dipped into their reserves. That money that you have as a church that's just supposed to be there for a rainy day. Well, they realized, it's raining right now. And they donated, I think, $2,500 to the Navajo Nation Relief Fund. We also had a fundraiser led by our partners at BLM Phoenix Metro that raised $20,000 for the Navajo Nation Relief Fund. And then one of our other churches here in Phoenix, one of their members lived on the Navajo Nation, grew up there, and has family there. And so they've been driving monthly, trucks full of supplies up to the Navajo Nation, because if you're a white person and you want to help, right, Black, Indigenous people of color, understand that the best way you can do that is to make sure people have the resources they need to do what they were already going to do. And in this case, the Navajo Nation was already going to turn out to vote. So what they needed was to make sure there weren't all these barriers in their way to keep them from showing up at the polls.
Yeah, I can jump in. Going off that, Janine, I think there's so many ways too that our congregations, I think encouraging asset mapping in this moment, if folks have not done that already, is so crucial, because our congregations sometimes, especially in COVID, are not recognizing the huge resources.
Can you explain what that is, Lisa? Explain asset mapping.
Yeah, so it's the process of looking at what resources, for example, a congregation has to offer to be in service to the movement. So for example, in North Carolina, when I am sort of connecting with a community partner, I share a Google sheet of all of the congregations we have in the state and what their address is, so public information. But their address and essentially says, if you need if you need a parking lot in the middle of rural Eastern North Carolina that's in this zip code, then call me and I want to make that connection. Or sometimes people are needing outdoor space that is sheltered, or places where Wi-Fi will extend outdoors, or refrigeration, or we have a congregation that is giving their parking lot this Saturday to be the central distribution location for a rally that's happening a few miles down the road. And then there's sanctuary. I mean, there's all these, and Ashley Horan created a beautiful, beautiful asset mapping tool that a few of us then flipped into, I think it's called the pandemic/fascism edition or something. I forget what it's called. It's kind of around in a few different places, but on uuthevote.org as well. And so sometimes we're just failing to recognize the ways in which we can contribute to movement, and that's babysitting, so that others can hold meetings and that we can show up in the ways that our partners are asking us to, but making sure that we're doing that thinking and then saying these are the things we can offer, and showing up when we're asked and the ways that we're asked to show up is important. And I think in this time, what I'm seeing in North Carolina right now is that people are discerning, having different sort of thinking about how to act in this moment, which is the post-election. Nicole shared with us the coup-o-meter yesterday, Janine. There's a website that's where are we in terms of an active coup? But in this moment, some of our folks are saying, our community partners are saying, we don't want to be out in the streets right now. And there's a really intentional decision, and we have to move to honor that decision. And then other community partners in my state, there's some who are saying, making that choice. And so some are moving in alignment with that. Some of our emerging community partners, led by people of color, are saying it's really important right now that there is an active, huge narrative in our state that's saying that the election is being stolen. And so there's a coalition called North Carolina Team Democracy that's moving to rally, and have had 34 events on the day after the election, a rally on Saturday, and another march this week. And so it's in a discernment process. But what I'm learning from this is I keep going back to that Elizabeth Wynn article, the Risk, Courage, and Discernment, because I think our level of comfort with my level, the folks that I'm working with, our congregations, are actively wrestling with risk in this moment. It goes right back to who is we, who is community. It reflects that some of us are not accustomed to risk. And so what does it mean to step up to say, I'm going to be a marshal for a rally, or I'm going to be a street medic, or a legal observer, or the police point communication person, and how some of us are navigating risk. It's reflecting that Some of us, especially white privileged people, are very unaccustomed to risk, and that when we do take risk, it's a choice. And so that's what I'm seeing happening around my neck of the woods. And UU the Vote has changed me. And it's a transformative thing. And I hope that people, the hope that I have in this moment, in all of these conversations about risk and how we're showing up, to answer a question from like 20 minutes ago is, listen, we engaged more people in this movement in this last year than maybe we ever have before. We reached out to 3.5 million people. We have, Janine and I, when we were talking a few weeks ago, I guess it was a week ago, we were saying, there's a sense in which the future of our faith is being decided in this moment as to whether we decide that this was a thing that happened, or this is actually the new theology. This is actually the new way, that is a deeper level of engagement, and that people have said this year, because we dug in this year, I have been changed. And this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the spiritual home I'm supposed to be. This is the place I'm supposed to be in. And I think, so that decision that we're making right now as a denomination, and if we invest in UU the Vote moving forward and saying we need to take this and nurture this and make sure all these beautiful relationships that we established this year, that they continue to be sustained and deepened, that's a big choice we have to make and figure out how to do as a denomination. But it's also a personal realization. How did this year change me? How did it deepen what my sense of faith is, what my sense of hope is? All of these incredibly important spiritual things for me. How did that change me? And have I felt in my bones what movement feels like, and know that this is where I'm supposed to be? So I think it's a denominational choice, and I think for a lot of us, it's a personal moment of reflection as well.
I just want to lean into that and hold that for like 30 more seconds, because that was passionate and beautiful, and I want to acknowledge that, Lisa. The work we have to do becomes layered, right? It's what we do out in the world, and it's the changing we do internally. Faith in action is literally finding what you know to be your core and manifesting it out loud. And it sounds like UU the Vote has helped you manifest what you already knew to be true, but put some words and shape to it in a container. And it's taking you to your next spiritual and emotional place. And there's so much beauty in that. Thank you for sharing that with us, with this community.
Amen. 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 One of the things I wanted to make sure that we had opportunities for is, and you all have named a bunch of them, and hopefully we've caught some of those in the chat and in the comment section, is to make sure that folks know, where their opportunities are to engage. And we keep saying UU the Vote has great links, and if you don't know anywhere else to go, start there. The CLF is also launching our holiday card program, which is a program that sends holiday cards to our incarcerated Unitarian Universalists. So we will put the link in that, and it's super easy. You just sign up to do it and say how many UUs you would like to send a card. It's actually not a card, it's a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that you can put a message onto. And we will send those materials to you. You just put a name and an address and a stamp on it and get it out into the mail. There's lots of restrictions that facilities have around the type of mail that incarcerated folks can have. So please make sure to follow the instructions that we give to you, because we give those instructions for very particular purposes. We want to be able to make that connection for some of our UUs who are currently incarcerated. So thank you for doing that. Any other places to plug in, Lisa, Janine, Aisha, Dawn, Quiana, that we want to make sure that folks know about?
There's so many. You can certainly plug in through UU to vote. There's all sorts of programs that are being held by all of our UU partners. I just want to lift up that if you're in a congregation and you feel like you want to do something, the first step is, as Lisa said, figure out what your resources are, asset map your congregation, what do you have to offer? And then you look in your community and what are the frontline folks doing? Who are the people most affected by whatever issue you feel like you want to tackle, and what are they doing? And then you go to them with your asset map and say, here are all the things we have to offer. What would be helpful to you?
And then accept
really
the
not.
answer. And then accept
and then
what
do
was
the thing.
said. Don't argue. Don't say you wanted to do something different. Don't say you don't like making sandwiches. Whatever the person says, you say,
Do the thing.
we will, so learn to follow.
That fellowship word I believe Janine used earlier is so powerful. I wrote that down with like a cloud around it. That usually means see that. We're fine following, gurus out in the world and all of those things, but we don't want to follow the people who sit next to us in our congregations every Sunday. So that's something to unpack and to think about. Why is it that you can't follow these local folks, but you follow the aspirations of folks all across the interwebs? So I just, put that out there for folks. Fellowship. Dig into that. What is that? What does that mean? So, for example, just to pull us into hopefully we're something we can cook up for next week, I am in fellowship for trans folks. I am not a trans person. Henceforth, I cannot lead trans community, but I can follow them and do exactly what they tell me to do, and I am willing and ready. So if we can worship Beyonce and have a church for Beyonce, what if we started worshiping Miss Smith, who sat next to me in church for the last 3 years? When can I start worshiping this family who's got 5 kids and they're doing homeschooling, crisis schooling right now? How do I look up to them? So find some local heroes and folks to follow.
Take your enthusiasm for Oprah and Beyonce and transfer it to the people you know and can actually call and talk to directly.
Yes.
And I'm just going to say this out loud. I'm a big proponent of this. You can do all the national work you want, but if you have no connection with local people, when it gets hot, I can't call Asia in Philadelphia and ask her for a cup of sugar. I can't ask her to watch my babies. I need to be able to knock on my neighbors next door. So all of this national work is beautiful, but know who your neighbors are. Know where your community gathers. Know where your resources are. Be in community. Not around community, not in the right zip code, not in your gentrified neighborhood that you got on the cheap. Know your people. That's how you become an asset. That's how you become a dot on that asset map. Quiana is an asset to my community because ... Aisha is an asset to my community because ... Start creating that map, living in that map. Sorry, we knew it was going to happen. I had 7 minutes to go on a preach and I made the cut. Woo!
There is a Stacey Abrams in every community, right? So find yours. Who's the Stacey Abrams in your community? Because it's not just Stacey Abrams is amazing, and I guarantee there's someone in your community doing that work. So why don't you know her name, and how can you be of support to her?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I try to track what are the, after long days, what are like the small victories from which I measure if I'm doing my job? And the huge one that I have had a good day if a community partner calls me and asks me for something, because that is as deep of a sign of trust as it gets. So I know I'm doing any day when that happens, I know I'm doing my job right. So I really appreciate you saying that.
And I would just add, so a lot of this advice is definitely focused on our mainline UU. And we have folks that are Black, Indigenous, people of color UUs. And the way we engage with this work is different. And one of the things I really want to reach out to you all if you're listening or watching is to make sure that you have plans in place for being protected, for being taken care of, that you know who you're going to go to if you need to get food, that you know who you're going to go to if you're hurt and you can't get to the emergency room. These are the kinds of plans that we need to have ready in our communities as we are watching the "Is This a Coup" meter, and that's real, and that is part of our everyday life right now. And I want to make sure that people understand that that is something in addition to all of this community organizing that we are doing. We are also dealing with, like, your communities of color are now also dealing with, what the fuck do we do if this really is a coup, because you know who they're coming after, right? So I just really want to make sure that folks understand that, yes, we're saying go out there and follow people and be of servant leadership. And sometimes my servant leadership is leadership, right? Because of what I need to say and how I need to show up in the world. And and that's okay. And sometimes my servant leadership is, I got to take care of my babies, and I will plug back in when I can. And that's okay too. So I just really shout out to everyone who's doing all the things, because we have to, because we don't have a choice about whether or not we engage with this, because it engages with us. So yeah, that's what I got today. Any last words? Anything anybody came to say and wants to make sure that they get out before we sign off with each other?
Well, I'm going to be watching the coup meter. So thank you, Lisa, for that, because I didn't know that existed. So yeah, I'll be watching that. And thank you both. This is always a great show. Somebody's called it the fastest hour of the week. So I true. And you know, I think, Quiana, I think I saw it on your page, have a plan or know who to call. And is it Heather Cox Richards? There's a woman professor who posts really in-depth. Yesterday was the first time I watched her for an hour. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up is it made me feel better that this probably isn't a coup. And it's more like he's just trying to make a lot of money, which isn't not shitty, but it's less shitty than a coup. So, you know, I would watch her hour yesterday. Like, it made me feel better. I don't know, maybe I'm being foolish, but I don't think he wants this country anymore. I just think he wants a lot of money and not go to.
I mean, I would probably be remiss to leave without plugging Beloved Conversations as a way to either do, so there's Beloved Conversations for BIPOC folks and Beloved Conversations for white folks, and Beloved Conversations for BIPOC folks find community. How do we care for each other? How do we care for ourselves? How do we stay safe? And Beloved Conversations for white folks, which I'm involved in, is, you know, if you're in that space where you're thinking, and speaking to white people as a white person, how did this happen? How did so many people vote for him again? And you feel that surprise, or you feel that despair, there is a place for you at Beloved Conversations for white folks, because we will talk about all of those ways that dominant culture has really fed into us and taught us all of these things that we're stuck in now. And so when I think about the work ahead, and I think about the challenges we had during UU Vote, like UU Vote had some amazing successes, and it also had some like real challenges where people were really resistant to phone bank because it was uncomfortable, right? And so when I think about those challenges, the solution for me is anti-racism work.
Thank you. And thank you to the Beloved Conversations folks for recognizing that we really did need a Beloved Conversations White Caucus and a Beloved Conversations Black Indigenous POC Caucus, and for hearing that feedback and making it so. It's one of the things that I love about that team and the work they're doing. So thank you all. Thank you, Janine and Lisa, for joining us today. We appreciate it. And as always, everyone, be well out there and do well for each other. Bye.